Hi, I'm Mary. You know that moment when you get to school and everyone stops talking and looks at you because you're stunningly beautiful? Well, that wasn't me. Not even close. I was the sort of girl that had to remind the teacher that I'm in the class or else they might think I missed it. Before I tell you all about my life-changing experience, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and don't forget to activate the notification bell or I'll send my dinosaur to bite you. To make things worse, I had a crush on Philip, the cutest guy in school. I've liked him forever, but I don't think he knew my name. I was sitting with Tom at the cafeteria when I saw Philip sitting with his cool friends. I couldn't help but stare at him with my mouth open. I was drooling like a little puppy. That's when Tom threw a tomato at my face and said with a loud voice, "Hello, I'm talking to you. Stop staring at that jerk." I told Tom to leave me alone, but then he stood up and walked towards Philip's table and started talking to him. I was panicking. Suddenly, Philip motioned me over with his arm and I walked over there. Tom and I sat with Philip and his friends. They acted as if we were their friends. We started chatting. It was cool. Until they started discussing who they were going to take with them to the homecoming party. I asked Philip who he was going to take with him, but then one of his friends shouted, "Why won't you take Mary?" Everyone started laughing loudly. I wanted to die. Acting as chill as I could, I told them that there was no need for Philip to take me because I was going with my boyfriend. Tom looked at me with a puzzled expression, but thank God he stayed silent. "You have a boyfriend?" Philip asked. "Of course," I replied. He lives in France." I looked at Tom, imploring him to save me. "Oh, yes," Tom said after a moment. "He's a cool guy. Plays polo. We see him every couple months. He's actually coming next week." When the day of the party came, I was with Tom when Philip asked about my French boyfriend. I told him he'd missed his flight. I kept repeating this lie all night until the unexpected happened. I heard Tom screaming, "She is a liar!" I looked at him, stunned. Tom grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "I'm in love with you, you idiot. Can't you at least pretend I'm your boyfriend rather than just having an imaginary one?" He left the party and I rushed after him. I held Tom's hand and I kissed him. And to my surprise, the kiss was amazing. After that night, we dated throughout my last 2 years in high school. But I couldn't love him. Actually, I never got over Philip. I couldn't help it. So I decided to reveal my secret to Tom. But to make things worse, Tom knew all about it. When I told him, he actually poured his milkshake over me and ditched me at the cafe. Luckily, graduation day came fast and I would never have to see him again. Without Tom in my mind, I started to think a lot more about Philip. To tell you a secret, I even started stalking him. He became an obsession. I couldn't stand the idea of not seeing him anymore, so I enrolled at the same university he was going to. Summer was terrible. I couldn't see Philip, and I didn't have Tom anymore. I thought it would never end. Finally, the first day of college came, and I was so excited to see Philip again that I arrived among the first students. When I saw him, my heart jumped. I acted cool as I said hi. I even acted surprised when he realized we had the same schedules. "Go figure," I said. And then we became friends. We studied together. We went to parties together. I didn't mind being in the friend zone. At least Philip was paying attention to me. One night, we were at a party, dancing, and I decided to go for it. It had been so many years of waiting. I kissed him, and the most amazing thing happened. He kissed me back. I was out of my body. We had a great time that night, and the next one, and the next one. Finally, I was Philip's girlfriend. I even told him I loved him, but then he said he had something to tell me. He already had a girlfriend. What? But he wanted to keep seeing me in secret. What a jerk. I was so mad at him that I ran away crying. But when the moment passed, I decided I was not going to stop. I'd waited too many years to finally be with Philip. I went back to him and said it was okay. I would be with him, in spite of his stupid girlfriend. I didn't know who she was, but I was going to have Philip only for me. The day he arrived at a party with his girlfriend, I wanted to die. It was Kirsten, the most popular girl from our school. She went to our university as well. How come I never saw her? They've been dating for almost a year now. I was so blind with excitement, I didn't see it coming. And the worst part is, she had everything planned. She wanted to see me at the party, and then sent a video to everyone of the moment I told Philip I loved him. Everyone started to laugh, and I felt as ashamed as I'd been at that horrible spring break party. I dropped out of college. I couldn't bear to see their faces again, the humiliation again. I got a job as a cashier in a small market outside town. I didn't want anybody to see me. After a while, I befriended a regular client whose name was Eric. We started dating, and it was okay. I was heartbroken, and he comforted me. But after a couple of weeks, weird things started to happen. He disappeared for days, and he didn't answer my calls. When I asked him what was happening, he said he was sick of me. No, my heart could not handle another embarrassing situation. I was so heartbroken, and to make it all worse, I found out that I was pregnant after 2 weeks. I told Eric, and he said he didn't want the baby because he was scared of babies. What? I blocked him and never spoke with him again. I kept my job for as long as I could until I was only weeks away from labor. The day Tiffany was born, I had no job, no money, and nowhere to live. In desperate times, I called my old friend Tom, but he wouldn't listen. My parents had died a long time ago. I had no one. I ended up in a shelter with my baby. And on those long, quiet nights, I had a lot of time to think about my life and my endless mistakes. I remembered Tom. He'd been the only one who ever understood me, and I broke his heart. I realized I'd been chasing men my whole life, making them a priority instead of the most important thing, myself. Luckily, at the shelter, there were quite a few women in a situation similar to mine. We did group therapy together, and I made some friends. It was nice for once to know I wasn't completely alone. We all took turns taking care of the babies so the others could go to work or study. Tiffany was now my priority, and I wanted to give her a good life. I got my job as a cashier back and started taking online courses. Things were okay for a while, but one day, Eric appeared and demanded to see his daughter. He smelled really bad and had a violent attitude. He said he was going to take her away unless I gave him money. I was so scared for Tiffany. I didn't want anything bad to happen to her. So I started giving him money every time he showed up, which was more frequent as time passed. One day I told him I didn't have more money, that he was taking all of it, and he got violent. He smashed some things in the supermarket and started shouting at me. Luckily, the owner appeared and called the police. They took him away, and I was so relieved. It turned out that he was wanted in 4 states for robbery, and the police had been after him for a long time. I told the owner of the store that Eric took all my money, and that I had a little girl to take care of. He said that he had a guest house that no one used, and that he and his wife had always loved kids, but could never have one of their own. He offered for me to stay at the guest house, and to take care of Tiffany while I worked and studied. Finally, things were getting in order. I continued to attend my group therapy and help my friends, but I lived next to the store and worked there. The owner and his wife were great people, and I felt like I was finally getting the parents I couldn't while growing up. Tiffany was getting bigger and soon started kindergarten. After a few years, I finally got my degree in economics and got a dream job offer in the city. As I was on my train to my interview, I got sad when I thought I would have to leave my foster parents. But when I arrived, I was shocked to see who the interviewer was. It was Philip. My heart jumped as I saw he was still as handsome as I remembered. He stared at me during the entire interview with that cocky smile, and I thought, what the hell is going on with him? After we finished, he walked towards the door and locked it. Then he turned around, walked back to me, and without any words, kissed me. He said that he missed me and that he was happy to know we were going to work together, that we would have a lot of fun. I couldn't believe what was happening. After a long kiss, I opened my eyes and realized that on the shelf there was a portrait of him and Kirsten in wedding clothing. I looked back at him and for the first time saw the ring on his finger. Oh my God! He was still the same Philip as always. Forever a charmer. Forever a jerk. I sat on the chair in shock. Suddenly, my whole life passed in front of my eyes and everything was so clear. I was about to make the worst decision in my life. I would leave the town, the loving parents, and the friends I'd made for a job in the city with Philip? Not a chance. For once in my life, I knew exactly what I had to do. I went back home and found my foster parents crying. They loved me and Tiffany, and they didn't want us to leave. I realized this was real. This was the kind of love I deserved and never had. One day, Tiffany came back home and she was talking all day that she found a new friend that had the same name as me, Mary. The only thought I had was, I wish she didn't have a hard life like I did. A few weeks later, we invited Mary to our house, so her father called to ask for directions to our house. And when I heard his voice, I started shaking. I knew that voice. It was Tom. My old friend, Tom. He also recognized my voice, so we chatted for a while, and I felt terribly ashamed. I'd hurt Tom's feelings in the worst way possible, and there he was, naming his daughter after me. He was the best person in the world, and I didn't deserve his love. But then he said he had no regrets. He had accepted his destiny long ago, and he loves his wife so much. He was happy that we met again, and he wanted us to be friends again. Of course, I told him with tears in my eyes. I will never hurt you again. So he came over, and we hugged for what felt like an eternity. And I know what you're thinking, but no, we did not do anything. I'm an adult now, and I stopped doing stupid things. So I kept on working at my parents' market for a while, and then opened my own financial aid office in town. Tiffany and Mary were best friends, and I had a great time with Tom and his loving wife. Our stomachs ached as we laughed, remembering all the wonderful times we spent together at school. I realized that it hadn't been as bad as I remembered. Tom taught me that if you choose to keep the good memories close to your heart, life can feel like a blessing.
Has anyone ever told you that a vacation changed their life? Well, let's just say a little vacation literally destroyed my life. I would have never thought it was possible that an Instagram photo shoot would leave me homeless. Before we get into that, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you do, you'll win a big trip before the end of the year. That's actually where my story starts. Just a fun getaway with my boyfriend Eric. See, from the Instagram point of view, Eric and I were two rich kids living a life of luxury. In a way, this couldn't be farther from the truth. While Eric kept insisting he was rich, there were a few red flags I ignored pretty early on. See, Eric seemed to be all about showing the world what a great couple we were and how great our lives were. I guess I always had my suspicions. Thinking back, there were a few times I should have gotten the idea that something was up. Like this one time, he took me out on this fancy date. He wore all of these expensive clothes and brought me some to wear too. That's when I noticed they all had tags on them still. He told me not to damage anything because he had to return them afterwards. I told him that if he couldn't afford it, we shouldn't do this. He would get angry at me for questioning him, saying he stayed rich by saving all these things. I thought that it was weird, but I was head over heels for the guy, so I didn't expect anything was up. That is, until I was with him for so long on this vacation. He took so many pictures, like we couldn't eat a single meal without him spending 15 minutes turning it into a little photo shoot. An outsider would have seen a luxury meal with a million different hashtags underneath, like #blessed or #couplegoals. Believe it or not, there was a secret nightmare behind these photos. In fact, this made me question a lot of the stuff people put on Instagram. Behind every perfect photo was a huge fight and very good angles. I kept asking if Eric was happy, and he kept telling me yes. I was a little concerned until he delivered the biggest surprise of the trip. Okay, so it was the second biggest surprise, but I'll go into that later. So one day, after he spent so long snapping pictures of our food that it got cold, he went live on his Instagram story. I thought it was weird because he always took so long choosing filters, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. He got down on his knees and proposed to me. It might have seemed like a quiet and intimate location, but he had millions of followers watching. I won't pretend I wasn't a little excited about it at the time, but looking back, it was incredibly cringy. I said yes, and we shared a pretty magical moment on camera. A moment that quickly faded when his live stream was off. That was the night before we left. I had doubts about us, but figured it would only get better. We had the rest of our lives, right? Wrong. We were all prepared to get on the plane when we were going through customs. I got flagged because something was weird, and Eric stayed back with me. The officers said it was nothing to worry about, probably just an issue with the system. Well, after about an hour of waiting, they told me news that shook me to the core. My passport wasn't valid. I don't understand. I said in disbelief. I used it to get on the plane after all. They told me that the security measures weren't as intense leaving the country as they were entering it. Unfortunately, they had just noticed that I didn't have a valid passport. I was so scared and nervous. This might have been my homeland, but I didn't want to be stranded here. It wasn't my home, and I almost had no money, relying off of Eric for most of the trip. To top it all off, I only spoke English. That's right. My parents wanted us to embrace the culture so much, they never spoke Hungarian with me. I turned to Eric to see what we should do. He looked super nervous. I asked him to stay, but he told me he would figure it out from America. He didn't want to lose his flight. Yeah, right. He left me right there in the customs section. He turned back for a moment, and I let myself hope that he was coming back for me. I feel sick to my stomach with what he said next. "Oh, I can't forget this," he said, running up and grabbing my ring off my finger. "It's just a rental, don't worry. I'll buy you a new one later." Well, there I was, all alone. He left me right there without having a second thought about me. But don't worry, he didn't quite leave my life yet. You'll have to wait to the end to hear about Eric. But I promise it's worth it. I just have more important things to discuss first. I waited for hours and hours. They ended up telling me that I just wasn't an American citizen. In fact, I wasn't a citizen anywhere. They were sorry, but there was nothing they could do for me. I was stranded with nothing but a couple of dollars, the clothes on my back, and a dying cell phone. My charger and emergency money was all in my checked luggage, which took off without me. I used the final moments of my cell phone to FaceTime with my parents and explained what happened. Turns out, they knew it was a fake passport. They had problems getting my real information, so they thought it would be just fine. I was so angry, I said some pretty harsh things to them, things that I regret saying to this day. I immediately wanted to take the mean words back, but before I could, the phone died. Normally, I got a little extra help from my good looks, but the stress of the experience and the lack of makeup access left me looking a little less than good. I was handed a couple of bags of stuff and just sent on my way. No one spoke English at all, and I was completely lost. I ended up living in a park for a couple of days. I sat there like a beggar with a dirty cup I took from a trash can to collect coins from strangers. At first, I saved up all of my coins to try to call my parents. Unfortunately, our phone was disconnected. They didn't have social media or anything, so there was no way to get a hold of them at all. As money got harder to come by, I gave up calling and focused on surviving. If I was lucky, I would make enough to exchange it for something to eat from one of the local street vendors. This one time, I had a pretty good day when some child stole a cup right in front of me. I ran after them for a couple of minutes, hopping over bushes and avoiding pedestrians. I caught the kid and ripped the cup from his hand. He tried speaking to me in Hungarian, but I didn't understand anything. That's when a young girl came from behind the corner and hid behind him. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. It was obvious he stole it for her. I let him have the money and just walked away, accepting that I would just have to go to bed on an empty stomach again. I sat on the ground with my head wrapped in a blanket and started dozing off. That's when I smelled the most amazing food in my life. I thought I was dreaming at first, but when I opened my eyes, there was a huge meal right in front of me. I was starving and I immediately dug in without asking any questions. I gulped the whole plate of food in under 5 minutes. I must have looked pretty funny doing it because I heard a little chuckle. That's right. In my fit of hunger, I never even bothered to see who had given me the food. This woman about my age in a business suit tried to say something in Hungarian, but I just stared back for a bit. When I didn't answer her immediately, she turned and said, "Is English better? I just said it seemed like you were hungry." I was in tears. My eyes were like literal waterfalls. It had been so long since anyone had treated me with such kindness, and that I could understand it. We talked about school and how I ended up here in the first place. When she asked me what I studied, her jaw dropped. "You study computer science?" she asked with her mouth wide open. That's right, folks. I'm not just some pretty face who obsessed over Instagram filters. I'm also pretty smart. She told me that smart people like me didn't belong on the streets, and to stop by her office sometime tomorrow. She fiddled through her wallet for a business card with her address on it. I could barely sleep that night. It was the first time in months I was going to bed on a full stomach, and I had hope. I was a little self-conscious walking up to the company building the next morning. I tried my best to wash my hair in a public restroom and clean up my clothes, but it was still very obvious I was living on the streets. Still, no one seemed to judge me at all. It also helped that the woman I saw yesterday was the CEO. I aced the interview, and they gave me a job on the spot. Just when I thought it couldn't get better, she gave me the company card. "We don't let our employees sleep on the streets," she said with a wink. She gave me the address to a hotel they did business with. I was going to live in one of the rooms there until I got set up with some sort of apartment. She was even nice enough to send a whole bunch of clothes there. She said I could have a couple of days to settle in. But on Tuesday, I would start my first day as one of her software engineers. Now, I had some internships with tech companies before. I was expecting a room in some small hostel or a basic hotel. What I wasn't expecting was a 5-star luxury experience. I had to do a double take to make sure I had the right address. When I walked in, all eyes were on me. For the first time in months, I was actually self-conscious about how I looked. Everyone was wearing elegant gowns and fancy jewelry. I, on the other hand, was wearing a very dirty dress and shoes with holes in them. "May I help you?" a butler asked, while eyeing me suspiciously. I told him I had been sent here by the tech company, and he immediately changed his tone. He brought me right up to my room. My room was amazing. It was like one of the things you would see on TV. I was even able to charge up my phone again for the first time in almost a year. I was kind of anxious to see what messages I would have gotten. Maybe something from Eric or my parents? Absolutely nothing. I logged into my Instagram only to see I now had a lot of followers. Someone had been posting content on my page this whole time. I went to my messages to see that whoever was posting on my page was also telling all of my friends I never wanted to see them again. This had Eric written all over it. I was starting to get angry again when I heard a knock at the door and looked up to see this super handsome man. He just wanted to make sure everything was okay. He introduced himself as Hans, a fan of my new company. He had promised my boss to show me around. Hans told me to make myself at home, and he would meet me for breakfast after I had gotten time to wash up and get a good night's sleep. I took the best shower I had ever taken in my life. Looking at myself with my hair washed and a clean face, I started to cry again. I know it's something so small, but it really does feel nice to feel pretty after I was invisible for so many months. Invisible was something I did not have to worry about. While I'd like to take credit as I looked gorgeous in makeup and my new ball gown, I think all eyes were always on Hans. I asked him why everyone was always staring at him. "Are you some sort of special guest?" I asked as we sat down at breakfast. "Guest? I own the hotel," he laughed. I really couldn't believe it. I always imagined the super wealthy to be mean and selfish, but Hans was everything else. The more I got to know him, the more I started to fall for him. How could I not become infatuated with this guy? I loved the way he always brought meals to the homeless children and was very patient teaching me Hungarian. If being kind and rich weren't enough to make him the top bachelor, he was incredibly handsome. I instantly forgot all about Eric and his schemes. Unlike Eric, Hans didn't treat me like some kind of toy. In fact, he was impressed with everything I had done. I spent my days in the office, making some pretty great money. At night, I'd meet with him and hang out until the wee hours of the morning. One day, he was having some pretty significant problems with his computer system, and I was able to fix everything in a matter of minutes. I know it's kind of weird, but that's when we shared our first kiss. He was looking for someone who wasn't just with him for money, and I wanted to be with someone that didn't treat me like an accessory. I shared all my hopes and dreams with him, and him with me. We were dating pretty quickly. I kind of started to forget about my old life in America. I got used to the language, the people, the culture. The only thing I really missed was my parents, who I was still unable to contact. Still, my new life here with Hans gave me a new family, which I very much appreciate. One day, Hans did something I seriously would have never expected, though. He asked me to meet him on the roof of the hotel one night. He bought me a whole new outfit to wear, complete with a huge diamond necklace and fancy heels. I expected something big, but when I got there, my mouth dropped. It was like a fairy tale. There were candles all around us and a fancy violinist playing classical music. There was Hans in the middle of the roof surrounded by roses. He told me that he had thought long and hard about our future, and he couldn't see himself without me in his. "But there is something I need to do before I propose," he said, signaling somewhere behind him. Out from behind some fixtures came my parents. I ran up to them, nearly breaking my heel and jumping in their arms. Turns out the second I called them, they sold everything and moved back here. Hans had spent months looking for them for me, without even saying anything. They had spent the last years looking for me. I was bawling my eyes out like a baby. Who thought I would spend the happiest day of my life with streaks of mascara down my face? Right in front of me, he asked my father for his blessing, which he gave with all of his heart. Then he knelt down on one knee and proposed to me. I said yes and never looked back. I never would have thought that I would have ended up living in a fancy hotel in Hungary, but I couldn't be happier. I still talk with some of my American friends now, but my life is here, and I have no intentions of coming back. Oh, and you remember Eric? Well, he ended up getting arrested. Some anonymous computer programmer released some evidence of him committing a crime. It's funny how things work out like